to another episode with the Millennial Group. In today's episode, we will be debunking NAR settlement rumors. Everyone and their grandmother has heard what's been going on with the settlement and how it can potentially affect real estate commissions. So we want to go into it a little bit deeper because we're noticing there's a lot of misinformation from brokers, surprisingly, and the media, and it's skewing everyone's perception of what could potentially happen. And I want to point out that nothing is exactly set in stone. It's just a proposal. Nothing is proposed or checked off or signed off on yet. But it's a start. We're moving towards some type of agreement. So what I want to first discuss and go into is what exactly is where the settlement is right now and how NAR is trying to settle. So ultimately, the settlement is basically resolved. They're trying to resolve claims against NAR and ultimately every member of NAR and every MLS that is underneath the National Association of Realtors. And any brokerage with a NAR member who has a residential transaction volume in 2022 that was $2 billion or below, they're excluded. That's practically pretty much everyone here in Oregon, at least. If you're in New York, that's different. That's a much different market. I mean, you can't really buy anything for like under $1 million in New York. So some of those brokerages like Douglas Elliman and maybe even some Cascade Sotheby's brokerages in New York, that's different. But here in Oregon, those folks were safe. Or not safe, but were excluded. However, if the settlement does move forward in mid-July and the proposal is signed off on, the National Association of Realtors will be responsible for paying $418 million over the next 4 years. So that's basically like where we're at right now with the settlement in terms of like the negotiations. Now, when it comes into like how things may change if that does take place and how that will affect commissions, there are only two major things that stands out that can affect how people are doing business. And I'll let Dina talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to point out is that commissions were negotiable way beyond this settlement. And I think a lot of it has to do with the miscommunication of it all.
Yeah.
To me, I think what this will bring is greater transparency, right? Because you want to be honest with your clients. What?
I think it's doing the opposite. That's just my opinion.
Really?
Yes. And the reason why I say that, because, we always had an obligation as real estate agents to be honest. That's like one of our, that's part of our code of ethics. Mm-hmm. And that's part of every agency agreement that we sign with the client, whether it's a listing or a buyer. We have to deal in honesty and good faith. So that's out the window there. We have that. In terms of transparency, though, so what they're saying is if NAR, signs off on this proposal, right, and they agree to this, what they're saying is that they have to create a new rule requiring all of the MLS participants to not show on the MLS any buyer's agent commission fee. So if you go on Zillow.com mid-July and this passes and this is like, okay, this is how it's going.
It's set in stone.
The general public will no longer be able to see what the buyer's agent commission is that's being offered from a seller.
Right.
Which is, to me, completely defeating the purpose of what they were trying to get, which was transparency about commissions. Because in our state, in Oregon and in Washington, in our contracts, it has been there since the beginning of time, right? Like, here's my fee. Mm-hmm. This is what I would like to, from my fee, I would like to split my fee with the buyer's agent, mm-hmm, X amount. And again, that's negotiable.
Right.
Same with Washington. Here's my fee. And in a buyer's agent commission or in a buyer's agent agreement, we say the same thing. Here's our fee. If a seller is willing to offer a commission, great. But if not, this is what we charge. Like, that has always been transparent.
Right.
And we have always been able to show that to the general public. Like, here, this is what we're able to pay a buyer's agent. But now that's going to be taken away if this moves forward.
Right.
So nothing's being transparent anymore. the general public will either have to have their agent call a listing agent.
There's going to be loopholes for sure.
In hopes that, they share the right information. So I think it defeats the purpose. But there's a positive side to it as well.
Right. I mean, what I meant in terms of transparency, I think that, a lot of people don't know what they're doing when it comes to buying or selling a house. I mean, you were never obligated to use a realtor. You were never obligated to pay the standard 6%, 4%, 3%, 2%, whatever.
Yeah,
there was never an obligation to do any of that. Why do you think there's for sale by owners? If you know the home buying process, be my guest and go buy the home yourself. You know what I mean? But most people don't have that knowledge, and they need agents to guide them through the process. Because I know way back when, only listing agents were a thing. Buyer's agents were never a thing, right? So clearly, people need that guidance, especially first-time home buyers. When they don't know a thing about inspections, they can't negotiate for themselves. They don't know how to get the transaction to the closing table successfully and smoothly, which is why our jobs are important, and which is why we're hired to do that. So you have to show your value, right? You have to show your value to your buyers, to your sellers, which is something that you should have always had to do. But if you don't like my prices, go down the street and work with him. But what will he do? What will we do for you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
100%.
It's just one of those things where, like, nothing in this world is free. So why do people expect to not pay us for an amazing service that we can offer them?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the perception of value.
100%.
But we can talk about that. I want to also dive into what the second rule is if this does move forward. And ultimately, they're saying that NAR has agreed to create a new rule requiring any MLS participants working with buyers to enter into a written agreement with buyers before the buyer even tours a home. So they've always encouraged us to have that agreement in place with buyers, but now it is going to be a new MLS rule. Like, it is a requirement. We cannot show houses without having that buyer's agent agreement in place, without going over the terms of what that agreement looks like, without showing our value proposition, and without ultimately deciding on compensation. So I think that is very important. And there's been a lot of backlash about that. Not a lot of consumers, I think, really understand that and the value of that, having that is, but a lot of agents who are not used to having those buyer agent representation agreements in place are furious. And they feel as if it's making them feel like they have to require someone to work with them, where that's not exactly the case. It's outlining how you will be compensated for your services, because you should be compensated for your services. You should not open 100 doors. You should not be negotiating any contracts without having an agreement in place. It's not professional. So I'm really glad that is one of the benefits of what the settlement is if it does move forward. It should have been a thing from the get-go. I've always used those agreements. If you use them with your sellers and listing agreements, use them with your buyers. It's a very simple thing to do, and it shouldn't be a hard thing to get done, in my opinion.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We're running a business here.
Yes, exactly.
It's definitely important to have those correct contracts in place. And I think I read some statistics somewhere. Actually, I might have heard them in a meeting, so don't quote me. But what they're saying is that buyer's agents' income could decrease by 20% to 25%. And a lot of the agents that will be affected by this are the agents that run their business solely on referrals, because they've never had to use those types of agreements before.
So I find that very interesting that you said that, because I was on the phone this morning with an agent out of Washington who said that she only runs her business from referrals only, which is not a bad thing.
No,
that's great.
Not at all.
But just like you said, because she runs her business like that, and
we were talking about relationships off trust.
Yes, which is fine. You should have those relationships off trust. Absolutely. But she never used the buyer's agent agreement.
Right.
And so when we were talking about this new settlement and the potentials that might come about from it, she was like kind of worried about it. She was like, I don't like feeling forced to have a buyer to work with me. And I'm like, you need to change your perspective on this agreement.
Right, 100%.
Because that's not what it means. That's not what it means. So I think it's very interesting that a lot of people who run their business just from that solely are like freaking out about it and thinking it's the end of the world, when in fact honestly, it hasn't. Nothing's changed.
I think it should be easier if you're running your business off of referrals and you have such a tight relationship with all of these people. I think it should be a more comfortable conversation to have with the people that you trust, right? Understand that this is a business that we're doing. If it's a friendship, if it's a family member, separate that relationship, turn it into business, because that's essentially what it is. And honestly, if you highlight like your responsibilities as an agent for a buyer, buyers have so much, like, what's the word I'm looking for?
If you like highlight your value to them.
Yeah, but they also have a lot of like lenience. You know what I mean?
In regard to what?
To a sale. Like buyers have so much authority in a sale to where they can leave, they can drop the sale, they can do all of that.
Sure, they can, but you still have to be compensated in my agreement.
No. That's
you can
what
drop,
I'm saying.
you can
But I'm just saying,
out.
like, in terms of having that conversation, like from the get-go with your clients who are buyers, explaining to them that it's honestly more so for them than it is for you. Because again, a lot of people think that it's like, I'm forcing my buyer to work with me.
It's for both parties.
Right.
It protects both parties. If an agent who is promising you, who's a realtor, who has to abide by the code of ethics, if they're promising you honesty and to deal in good faith, confidentiality, if they're promising you all of those things that a realtor is supposed to provide to a client and they're not upholding to that agreement, that gives a buyer or a seller the right to take them to court because they did not follow what their agreement was. It protects the agent and making sure if they're going to work hard and do all of this work and bring you all the value that you need to successfully get to the closing table, that yes, they get compensated for it as they should. So I think it helps both parties. It should have been a requirement from the get-go in our state. So every state is different, but it should have been a requirement. And I think it helps really push the fact that we are professionals in this. We're not just door openers. Okay, we're not going to waste our time sending you a bunch of homes. We want to actually bring you value and we want to be compensated for it. And that's what I'm saying. Nothing has changed when it has come to commissions with this settlement. Everyone had the ability to negotiate fees with their realtor. If the fees does not work for them, you can always go and list with someone who charges 1%. Redfin does it day in and day out. That's their business model. There are options, and there has always been options for people to decide who they want to work with. But that's not going to change the fact that some people understand what their value is, and they're going to charge what they believe their value is. And I think that just needs to be out on the table and needs to be understood. And if you realize that you have a great broker, then do the right thing and pay the broker what they deserve to be paid. So now we can talk about what the conversation is going to look like now with consumers, sellers, and buyers. If this does take place, and how it is our job to properly educate consumers, a buyer or a seller, when it comes down to this. And I've had this conversation many, many times already because people are asking about it. And I'm really glad that people are asking. They're not just jumping to conclusions.
Oh, 100%.
You know, some folks are, and that's fine. It's easy to do so when you have the media throwing things in your face. But some people are actually curious, like, how is this going to affect my ability to buy a house? How is this going to affect my ability to sell my property? What are the next steps if this comes about? And a conversation I had with the seller last week in Washougal, beautiful property. And the first thing she asked me, she didn't even ask how my day was. She was like, so.
The NAR settlement.
The NAR settlement. And I was like,
I expected this.
Let me sit down first. Let me put my bag down. But she went right into it because it's the hot topic right now. And she asked me, she was like, so is this going to change your commission fee? How is this going? Do I have to pay the buyer's agent? Like, what if I don't want to, etc.? And I said, those are all great questions. And I want to let you know that as it always has been, that is completely negotiable. Is that going to change my fee? No, ma'am. And here's why it's not going to change my fee. Here are my compensation packages. Here are my marketing presentation. This is why it's not going to change my fee, because my services are not going to change because of a settlement. I'm still going to bring you the same level of value. I'm still going to make sure that I'm going to bring you the same level of exposure. So no, ma'am, my commission fee is not going to change. Now, do you want to pay a buyer's agent, or do you have to pay a buyer's agent? Absolutely not. And that has been the same case 6 months ago, a year ago, 6 years ago. You never had to pay them. But here are the benefits of paying them and why it might be a good idea to do so. If you want to do it, great. If not, great. But here are some of the potential things that can happen if you don't. And she understood that. And she was like, that completely makes sense. And I also went into what the actual changes are that has to do with commissions. And the main thing is we cannot just...
You just can't display that
We can't display it on the MLS.
No.
Zillow will no longer show buyer's agent commissions. Realtor.com will no longer show buyer's agent commissions.
And that's where the loopholes and versatility take place. There are so many ways to go about it, all of which we have yet to see because we still don't know where this is going to take us, right? So, I mean, I've heard things about like automatic emails, maybe flyers, there's a phone call. There's so many different ways you can go about it. It's
about
not
sharing what the buyer's agent commission is.
It's not the end of the world. But I think a conversation with the buyer, I mean, obviously properly educating them in that sense, but it is definitely going to be a little bit harder for buyers, I believe, especially if the listing agent isn't willing to split the commission with the buyer's agent or seller isn't willing to pay the buyer's agent, right? Because ultimately, it's already very hard and emotional to buy a home. Most buyers, especially first-time home buyers, are struggling to get together a down payment and to pay their closing costs off. But adding another expense on top of that is a lot. It's a lot. So I think ultimately what that conversation looks like with the buyer is, hey, in the event that the listing agent isn't willing to split the commission, in the event that the sellers aren't willing to pay our commission, what does that look like for you? And that's just having an open conversation with your buyers. Are they able to compensate you at all if you were not to get compensated from everybody else? Yeah. Right? Another great idea that Cheryl actually had is commission packages for buyers.
Yep. And that's what I was saying. Like, I love commission packages because it gives the people
It gives
options.
you authority. It gives you options to decide.
It gives the seller and buyers options. I love them. I've been using them for a while. And that's why I say my fees don't change. These are my 3 options. We can still negotiate them. Right, we're still negotiating which one works best for you.
Right,
but this is what the minimum I'm willing to do because I work very, very hard. And the same thing can apply for buyers too. Like, here are my commission packages. I haven't used anything like that for buyers.
No, and it looks very different.
It looks very different. But I think it'd be a really good tool to utilize as well for someone, especially a first-time home buyer, to again give them options. And I think giving someone options is the best thing you can do for anybody, honestly. Right. Just because, again, everyone needs options, and it's important. So I love that idea. I love that Cheryl brought that up. Because
100%.
Me, I would have just been like, here's this is my fee.
No, I think it's great.
Can you work with this? Let's see what we can work with.
There are so many ways, and obviously this is the opportunity for all of us to get creative and really stand out from everybody else, right? I mean, some people, if you're somebody that thrives off of pressure, if you're somebody that really doesn't take no for an answer, this is your chance. This is a challenge, right? This is your chance to be a go-getter and make yourself stand out from everybody else. What are you going to do differently?
Yep.
How are you going to show your value? How are you going to prove that to your clients?
Yes.
So commission packages are a great way to do so.
I think so too.
For buyers, I mean, I think that looks the way it'll look. Like, you could have a certain amount of homes that you can show them based off of a fee. Yep. Right? Like, do you want to see 2 homes? Do you want to see 5 homes? Do you want to see this many homes? It might be a flat fee at first, but then as you progress, it gets to X, Y, and Z. But again, having the right contracts in place is also very important.
And retainers are a good option too. I was thinking about the number of homes shown too, but I think a retainer that can be applied at closing once it closes, but to also say, hey, I understand you have this tight budget, but here's my upfront fee to go out, show you houses, negotiate contracts. And then, this fee can be applied back at closing. This is just something to hold it down for now.
Like a deposit. You pay deposits for everything. Yeah. Why not pay a realtor a deposit? Because there's been so many times where I've wasted my time and the deal fell through. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's a great idea. I think that should be brought to attention. For sure.
I've been telling everyone on the Facebook groups, in the real estate agent Facebook groups, guys, we should think about retainers. But let's see if anybody
I
listens
personally
to me.
I haven't seen anyone use them that I know or in my close circle.
This market. No, not in this market, but it's very common in other markets like Georgia, Missouri. A lot of, and again, like that's one thing we have to think about. Every market's different. Every contract
100%.
is different.
Yeah.
So what would have been like a scary thing for like another state, this is like, oh, we've been doing this for a while. Why is the settlement like really? Yeah. I'm unbothered by it because I'm like, we've always been doing this.
I'm not sure which state is directly like really affected by this. I want to say New York because they do things extremely differently than we do.
Missouri, where it started, is one as well. Kansas, they are a non-disclosure state to begin with, which is why they're like, oh, the whole transparency thing. You can't even figure out on like what a home sold for is Zillow. You have to call the agent in order to figure out what a home actually sold for when it closes because it's not public knowledge. Yeah. So that state is very different, but I think it's going to be a really good time, whether this moves forward or not. We just have to shift and pivot. Sellers negotiate. Buyers negotiate. Realtors negotiate, and have fun with it. It doesn't have to be an aggressive thing. It needs to be a win-win-win for all parties, and make sure, you go into it with the mindset like, I'm excited to work with this person as a realtor, and I'm excited to work with the seller.
Perspective.
Let's get this deal done together. Let's win together. And that's what it really should be about. It shouldn't be tagging people on against each other. We're all supposed to be a team here.
Right. So
I think that's how we need to change our perception, and we just need to pivot a little bit with how things move forward if they do move forward. So we want to hear from you. We want to get your thoughts on this settlement, and if you learn anything from this, like debunking, great, because
please comment it. I want to know what you thought differently.
Yeah, I want to know if you thought like, oh my gosh, 6%'s gone forever now. No, there's still going to be people charging what they want to charge, but let's hear from you guys what your thoughts are. Are you excited about these potential changes? And we will see you guys on the next show. Thanks for watching.